Hello, guys and gals. We are reading. This will be part 2 of Roald Dahl's Fantastic Mr. Fox. It was a movie a while back, though there are a lot of differences between the movie and this book, as always. And that's what makes movies worthwhile and why it's good to read books, because they very seldom will mirror what movies do. Anyways, excuse me just a minute. I need to get a drink. I have been reading books all afternoon. I've been reading books in bulk, so, okay. I believe you're ready. We are to Chapter 9. Mr. Fox has a plan. Now let's find out about Mr. Fox's plan. For 3 days and 3 nights, this waiting game went on. How long can a fox go without food or water? Bogus asked on the 3rd day. Not much longer now, Bean told him. He'll make a run for it soon. He'll have to. Bean was right. Down in the tunnel, the foxes were slowly but surely starving to death. If only we could have just a tiny sip of water, said one of the small foxes. Oh, Dad, can't you do something? Couldn't we make a dash for it, Dad? We'd have a little bit of a chance, wouldn't we? No chance at all, snapped Mrs. Fox. I refuse to let you go up there and face those guns. I'd sooner you stay down here and die in peace. Mr. Fox had not spoken for a long time. He had been sitting quite still, his eyes closed, not even hearing what the others were saying. Mrs. Fox knew that he was trying desperately to think of a way out, and now, as she looked at him, she saw him stir himself and get slowly to his feet. He looked back at his wife. There was a little spark of excitement dancing in his eyes. What is it, darling? Said Mrs. Fox quickly. I've just had a bit of an idea, Mr. Fox said carefully. What? They cried. Oh, Dad, what is it? Come on, said Mrs. Fox. Tell us quickly. Well, said Mr. Fox, as he stopped and sighed and sadly shook his head. He sat down again. It's no good, he said. It won't work after all. Why not, Dad? Because it means more digging, and we aren't any of us strong enough for that after 3 days and nights without food. Yes, we are, Dad, cried the small foxes, jumping up and running to their father. We can do it. You see, if we can't... We can do it. You see, if we can't, so can you. Mr. Fox looked at the 4 small foxes, and he smiled. What fine children I have, he thought. They are starving to death, and they haven't had a drink for 3 days, but they are still undefeated. I must not let them down. Okay, we're at page 50. Oops. Page 50. I suppose we could give it a try, he said. Let's go, Dad. Tell us what you want us to do. Slowly, Mrs. Fox got to her feet. She was suffering more than any of them from the lack of food and water. She was very weak. I'm sorry, she said, but I don't think I'm going to be much help. You stay right there. You are my darling. Oh, you stay right where you are, my darling, said Mr. Fox. We can handle this by ourselves. Okay. Chapter 10. Bogus's Chicken House number 1. This time we must go in a very special direction, said Mr. Fox, pointing sideways and downward. So he and his 4 children started to dig once again. The work went much more slowly now, yet they kept at it with great courage, and little by little the tunnel began to grow. Okay, page 52. Dad, I wish you would just tell us where we are going, said one of the children. I dare not do that, said Mr. Fox, because this place I am hoping to get to is so marvelous that if I describe it to you now, you would go crazy with excitement. And then, if we fail to get there, which is very possible, you would die of disappointment. I don't want to raise your hopes too much, my darlings. For a long, long time, they kept digging. For how long they did not know, because there were no days and no nights down there in the murky tunnel. But at last, Mr. Fox gave the order to stop. I think, he said, we had better take a peep upstairs now and see where we are. I know where I want to be, but I can't possibly be sure. we're anywhere near it. Slowly, wearily, the foxes began to slope the tunnel up towards the surface. Up and up it went until suddenly they came to something hard above their heads, and they could go up no further. Mr. Fox reached up to examine this hard thing. "It's wood," he whispered. "Wooden planks." "What does that mean, Dad?" "It means, unless I am very much mistaken, that we are right underneath somebody's house," whispered Mr. Fox. "Be very quiet now, while I take a peek." Carefully, Mr. Fox began pushing up one of the floorboards. The boards creaked, creaked most terribly, and they all ducked down, waiting for something awful to happen. Nothing did, so Mr. Fox pushed up a second board, and then, very, very cautiously, he poked his head up through the gap. He let out a shriek of excitement. "Chicken house! Chicken coop!" "I've done it!" he yelled. "I've done it! First time! I've done it! I've done it!" He pulled himself up through the gap in the floor and started prancing and dancing with joy. "Come on up," he sang out. "Come up and see where you are, my darlings. What a sight for a hungry fox! Hallelujah! Hooray! Hooray!" The four small foxes scampered up out of the tunnel, and what a fantastic sight it was that now met their eyes. They were in a huge shed, and the whole place was teeming with chickens. There were white chickens and brown chickens and black chickens by the thousand. "Bogus's chicken house number 1, cried Mr. Fox. "It's exactly what I was aiming at. I hit it slap in the middle, first time. Isn't that fantastic? And if I may say so, rather clever." The small foxes went wild with excitement. They started running around in all directions, chasing the stupid chickens. "Wait," ordered Mr. Fox. "Don't lose your head. Stand back. Calm down. Let's do this properly. First of all, everyone have a drink of water." They all ran over to the chickens' drinking trough and lapped up the lovely cool water. Then Mr. Fox chose 3 of the plumpest hens, and with a clever flick of his jaw, he killed them instantly. "Back to the tunnel," he ordered. "Come on. No fooling around. The quicker you move, the quicker you shall have something to eat." "56. On another day, one after another, they climbed down through the hole in the floor, and soon they were all standing once again in the dark tunnel. Mr. Fox reached up and pulled the floorboard back into place. He did this with great care. He did it so that no one could tell they had ever been moved. "My son," he said, giving the 3 plump hens to the biggest of his 4 small children, "run back with these to your mother. Tell her to prepare a feast. Tell her the rest of us will be along in a jiffy, as soon as we have made a few other little arrangements." A surprise. This is chapter 11, A Surprise for Mrs. Fox. The small fox ran back along the tunnel as fast as he could, carrying the 3 plump hens. He was exploding with joy. "Just wait," he kept thinking. "Just wait till Mummy sees these." He had a long way to run, but he never stopped once on the way, and he came bursting in upon Mrs. Fox. "Mummy," he cried out of breath. "Look, Mummy, look, wake up and see what I've brought to you." Mrs. Fox, who was weaker than ever now from a lack of food, opened one eye and looked at the hens. "I'm dreaming," she murmured, and then closed her eye again. "You're not dreaming, Mummy. They're real chickens. We're saved. We're not going to starve." Mrs. Fox opened both eyes and sat up quickly. "But, my dear children," she cried, "where on earth—" "Bogus's chicken house number 1, spurted the small fox. "We tunneled right up under the floor, and you've never seen so many big fat hens in all your life, and Dad said to prepare a feast. They'll be back soon." The sight of food seemed to give new strength to Mrs. Fox. "A feast it shall be," she said, standing up. "Oh, what a fantastic fox your father is. Hurry up, child, and start plucking those chickens." Far away down the tunnel, the fantastic Mr. Fox was saying, "Now for the next bit, my darling. This one will be as easy as pie. All we have to do is dig another little tunnel from here to there." "To where, Dad?" Don't ask so many questions. Start digging. Now we're to chapter 12. Badger. Excuse me. Ow. Mr. Fox and the three remaining small foxes dug fast and straight. They were all too excited now to feel tired or hungry. They knew they were going to have a whacking good feast before long, and the fact that it was none other than Bogus's chickens they were going to eat made them chortle with laughter every time they thought of it. It was lovely to realize that while the fat farmer was sitting up there on the hill waiting for them to starve, he was also giving them their dinner without knowing it. "Keep digging," said Mr. Fox. It's not much further." All of a sudden, a deep voice from above their heads said, "Who goes there?" The foxes jumped and looked up quickly, and they saw peeking through a small hole in the roof of the tunnel a long, black, pointy, furry face. "Badger!" cried Mr. Fox. "Foxy!" cried Badger. "My goodness me, I'm glad I've found someone at last. I've been digging around in circles for 3 days and nights, and I haven't had the foggiest idea where I am." Badger made the hole in the ceiling bigger and dropped down beside the foxes. A small badger, his son, dropped down after him. "Haven't you heard what's happening up on the hill?" Badger said excitedly. "It's chaos. Half the wood has disappeared, and there are..." Page 60. "Men with guns all over the countryside. None of us can get out, even at night. We're all starving to death." Who is we?" asked Mr. Fox. "All us diggers. That's me and Mole and Rabbit and all our wives and children, even Weasel, who usually sneak out of the tightest spots, is right now hiding down my hole with Mrs. Weasel and 6 kids. What on earth are we going to do, Foxy? I think we're finished." Mr. Fox looked at his 3 children and he smiled. The children smiled back at him, sharing his secret. "My dear old Badger," he said, "this mess you're in is all my fault." "I know it's your fault," said Badger furiously. "All the farmers are not going to give up till they've got you. Unfortunately, that means us as well. It means everyone on the hill." Badger sat down and put his paws around his small son. "We're done for," he said softly. "My poor wife up there is so weak she can't dig another yard." "Nor can mine," said Mr. Fox, "and yet at this very moment she is preparing for me and my children the most delicious feast of plump, juicy chickens." "Stop!" cried Badger. "Don't tease me. I can't stand it." "It's true!" cried the small foxes. Dad's not teasing. We've got chickens galore. And because everything is entirely my fault," said Mr. Fox, "I invite you to share the feast." "I invite everyone to share it. You and Mole and Rabbit and Weasel and all your wives and children. There'll be plenty to go around, I can assure you." "You mean it?" cried Badger. "You really mean it?" Mr. Fox pushed his face close to Badger's and whispered darkly, Do you know where we've just been?" "Where?" "Right inside Bogus's chicken house, number 1. "No." Page 62. "Yes, but that's nothing to where we are going now. You have come just at the right moment, my dear Badger. You can help us dig, and in the meantime your small son can run back to Mrs. Badger and all the others and spread the good news." Mr. Fox turned to the small badger and said, "Tell them they are invited to a fox's feast. Then bring them all down here and follow this tunnel back until you find my home." "Yes, Mr. Fox," said the small badger. "Yes, sir. Right away, sir." "Oh, thank you, sir." And he scrambled quickly back through the hole in the roof of the tunnel and disappeared. We're on chapter 13, Bunce's Giant Storehouse. "My dear Foxy," cried Badger, "what in the world has happened to your tail?" "Don't talk about it, please," said Mr. Fox. "It's a painful subject." He's pointing at the bandage. Yeah. They were digging the new tunnel. They dug on in silence. Badger was a great digger, and the tunnel went forward at a terrific pace now that he was lending a paw. Soon they were crouching underneath yet another wooden floor. Mr. Fox grinned slyly, showing sharp white teeth. "If I'm not mistaken, my dear Badger," he says, "we are now underneath a farm which belongs to that nasty little pot-bellied dwarf Bunce. We are, in fact, directly underneath the most interesting part of that farm." "Ducks and geese," cried the small foxes, licking their lips. "Juicy, tender ducks and big, fat geese." "Exactly," said Mr. Fox. But how in the world can you know where we are?" asked Badger. Mr. Fox grinned again, showing even more white teeth. "Look," he said, "I know my way around these farms blindfolded. For me, it is just as easy below ground as it is above." He reached high and pushed up the wooden floorboards, then another, and poked his head through the gap. "Yes," he shouted, and jumped up into the room above. "I've done it again. I've hit it smack on the nose, right in the bull's-eye. Come and look." Quickly Badger and the three small foxes scrambled up after him. They stopped and stared. They stood and gaped. They were overwhelmed. They couldn't speak, for what they now saw was a kind of fox's dream, a badger's dream, a paradise for hungry animals. "This, my dear old Badger," proclaimed Mr. Fox, "is Bunce's mighty storehouse. All his finest stuff is stored in here before he sends it off to market. Against all the four walls of the great room, stacked in cupboards and piled upon shelves, reaching from floor to ceiling, were thousands and thousands of the finest and fattest ducks and geese, plucked and ready for roasting. And up above, dangling from the rafters, there must have been at least 100 smoked hams and 50 sides of bacon." "Just feast your eyes on that," cried Mr. Fox, dancing up and down. What did you think of it? Pretty good grub." Suddenly, as though springs had been released in their legs, the three hungry small foxes and the ravenously hungry Badger sprang forward to grab the luscious food. "Stop," ordered Mr. Fox. "This is my party, so I shall do the choosing." The others fell back, licking their chops. Mr. Fox began prowling around the storehouse, examining the glorious display with an expert eye. A thread of saliva slid down one side of his jaw and hung suspended in midair, then snapped. "We mustn't overdo it," he said. "Mustn't give the game away. Mustn't let them know what we've been up to. We must be neat and tidy and take just a few of the choicest morsels. So, to start with, we shall have 4 plump young ducks." He took them from the shelf. "Oh, how lovely and fat they are. No wonder Bunce gets a special price for them in the market. All right, Badger, lend me a hand and get them down. You children can help as well. There we go. Goodness me, look at how your mouths are watering. And now, I think we had better have a few geese. 3 will be quite enough. We'll take the biggest. Oh my, you've never seen finer geese than these in a king's kitchen. Gently does it. That's the way. And what about a couple of nice smoked hams? I adore smoked hams. Don't you, Badger? Fetch me that step-ladder, will you please?" Mr. Fox climbed up the ladder and handed down 3 magnificent hams. "And do you like bacon, Badger?" "I'm mad about bacon," cried Badger, dancing with excitement. "Let's have a side of bacon, that big one up there." "And carrots, Dad," said the smallest of the 3 small foxes. "We must take some of those carrots." "Don't be a twerp," said Mr. Fox. "You know we'll never eat anything like that." "It's not for me, Dad. It's for the rabbits. They only eat vegetables." "Oh, that's thoughtful." "My goodness me, you're right," cried Mr. Fox. "What a thoughtful little fellow you are. Take 10 bunches of carrots." Soon all this lovely loot was lying in a neat heap upon the floor. The small foxes crouched close, their noses twitching, their eyes shining like stars. "And now," said Mr. Fox, "we shall have to borrow from our friend Bunce 2 of those useful push carts over in the corner. He and Badger fetched the push carts, and the ducks and the geese and the hams and the bacon were loaded onto them. Quickly, the push carts were lowered into the hole in the floor. The animals slid down after them, back into the tunnel. Mr. Fox again pulled the floorboards very carefully into place so that no one could see that they had been moved. "My darlings," he said, pointing to the two of the three little foxes, small foxes, "take a cart each and run back as fast as you can to your mother. Give her my love and tell her we are having guests for dinner. The badgers, the moles, the rabbits, and the weasels. Tell her it must be a truly great feast, and tell her the rest of us will be home as soon as we've done one more little job." "Yes, Dad, right away, Dad," they answered, and they grabbed a trolley each and went rushing off down the tunnel. That's cute. And we are to Chapter 14. Badger has doubts. "Just one more visit," cried Mr. Fox. "And I'll bet I know where that'll be," said the only small fox now left. He was the smallest fox of them all. "Where?" asked Badger. "Well," said the smallest fox, "we've been to Bogus, and we've been to Bunce, but we haven't been to Bean. It must be Bean." "You're right," said Mr. Fox, but what you don't know is which part of Bean's place we are about to visit." "Which?" they said both together. "Aha," said Mr. Fox. "Just you wait and see." They were digging and they talked. The tunnel was going forward fast. Suddenly Badger said, "Doesn't this worry you just a little bit, Foxy?" "Worry me?" said Mr. Fox. "What?" "All this stealing." Mr. Fox stopped digging and stared at Badger as though he had gone completely dotty. "My dear old furry frump," he said, "do you know anyone in the whole world who wouldn't swipe a few chickens if his children were starving to death?" There was a short silence while Badger thought deeply about this. "You are far too respectable," said Mr. Fox. "There is nothing wrong with being respectable," Badger said. "Look," said Mr. Fox, "Bogus, Bunce, and Bean are out to kill us. You realize that, I hope." "I do, Foxy, I do indeed," said the gentle Badger. "But we're not going to stoop to their level. We don't want to kill them." "I should hope not indeed," said Badger. "We wouldn't dream of it," said Mr. Fox. "We shall simply take a little food here and there to keep us and our families alive, right?" "I suppose we'll have to," said Badger. "If they want to be horrible, let them," said Mr. Fox. "We down here are decent, peace-loving people." Badger laid his head on one side and smiled at Mr. Fox. "Foxy," he said, "I love you." "Thank you," said Mr. Fox. "And now let's get on with the digging." 5 minutes later, Badger's front paws hit against something flat and hard. "What on earth is this?" he said. "It looks like a solid stone wall." He and Mr. Fox scraped away the soil. It was a wall, but it was built of bricks, not stone, and the wall was right in front of them, blocking their way. "Now, who in the world would build a wall under the ground?" asked Badger. "Simple, very simple," said Mr. Fox. "It's the wall of an underground room, and if I'm not mistaken, it is exactly what I'm looking for." Bean's secret cider cellar. Okay, now that is hard to say. Mr. Fox examined the wall carefully. He saw that the cement between the bricks was old and crumbly, so he loosened the brick without much trouble and pulled it away. Suddenly, out from the hole where the brick had been, there popped a small, sharp face with whiskers. "Go away," it snapped. "You can't come in here. It's private." "Good Lord," said Badger. "It's Rat." It is indeed Rat. "You saucy beast," said Mr. Fox. "I should have guessed we'd find you down here somewhere." "Go away," shrieked Rat. "Go on, beat it. This is my private pitch." "Shut up," said Mr. Fox. "I will not shut up," shrieked Rat. "This is my place. I got here first." Mr. Fox gave a brilliant smile, flashing his white teeth. "My dear Rat," he said softly, "I am a hungry fellow, and if you don't hop it quickly, I shall eat you up in one gulp." That did it. Rat popped back fast out of sight. Mr. Fox laughed and began pulling more bricks out of the wall. When he had made a biggish hole, he crept through it. Badger and the smallest fox followed him in. They found themselves in a vast, damp, gloomy cellar. "That is it," cried Mr. Fox. "This is what?" said Badger. "This place is empty." "Where are the turkeys?" asked the smallest fox, staring into the gloom. I thought Bean was a turkey man." He is a turkey man," said Mr. Fox, "but we're not after turkeys now. We've got plenty of food." "Then what do we need, Dad?" "Take a good look around," said Mr. Fox. "Don't you see anything that interests you?" Badger and the smallest fox peered into the half-darkness. Their eyes became accustomed to the gloom, and they began to see what looked like a whole lot of big glass jars standing upon shelves around the walls. They went closer. They were jars. There were hundreds of them, and upon each was written the word cider. The smallest fox leapt high in the air. "Oh, Dad," he cried, "look what we found. It's cider." "Exactly," said Mr. Fox. "Tremendous," shouted Badger. "Bean's secret cider cellar," said Mr. Fox. "But go carefully, my dears. Don't make a noise. The cellar is right underneath the farmhouse itself." "Cider," said Badger, "is especially good for badgers. We take it as medicine. One large glass 3 times a day with meals and another at bedtime. It will make the feast into a banquet," said Mr. Fox. While they were talking, the small fox had sneaked a jar off the shelf and had taken a gulp. "Wow!" he gasped. "Wowee!" You must understand that this was no ordinary weak, fizzy cider one buys at the store. It was the real stuff. Homemade fiery liquor that burned in your throat and boiled in your stomach. "Ah!" shouted the smallest fox. "This is some cider." "That's quite enough of that," said Mr. Fox, grabbing the jar and putting it to his own lips. He took a tremendous gulp. "It's miraculous," he whispered, fighting for breath. It's fabulous. It's beautiful." "It's my turn," said Badger, taking the jar and tilting his head well back. The cider gurgled and bubbled down his throat. It's like melted gold," he gasped. "Oh, Foxy, it's like drinking sunbeams and rainbows." "You're poaching," shrieked Rat. "Put that down at once. There'll be none left for me." Rat was perched upon the highest shelf in the cellar, peering out from behind a huge jar. There was a small rubber tube inserted in the neck of the jar, and Rat was using this tube to suck out the cider. "You're drunk," said Mr. Fox. "Mind your own business," shrieked Rat. "And if you great clumsy brutes come messing about in here, we'll all be caught. Get out and leave me to sip my cider in peace." At that moment, they heard a woman's voice calling out in the house above them. "Hurry up and get that cider, Mabel," the voice called. "You know Mr. Bean doesn't like to be kept waiting, especially when he's been out all night in a tent." The animals froze. They stayed absolutely still, their ears pricked, their bodies tense. Then they heard the sound of a door being opened, the door that was at the top of the flight of stairs, the top of the flight of stone steps leading down from the house to the cellar. And now someone was starting to come down those steps. We are to chapter 16, The Woman, but we are going to have to wait, and we will probably finish this up in the next part. We will be probably finishing this book in part 3. I appreciate everybody sticking around to the end of the video. If you like this content, then make sure that you subscribe and you like, and that you ring the bell so that you know when I upload. Any information you need to know will be in the description. And as always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.